Hi, my name is Leslie Pagel, and welcome to Purpose Project. In this episode, I sit down with Adam Weber. Adam is an entrepreneur, he is an executive coach, and ultimately, Adam is someone who is deeply passionate about helping leaders grow with intention. In this episode, Adam and I explore the intersection between leadership, purpose, and business success. It's an episode that has me thinking a lot about the role that purpose plays in business. And specifically, it's got me thinking a lot about the opportunity that businesses have to drive success through an activated purpose. Let's take a listen. All right. Adam, thank you so much for being on Purpose Project. I'm really looking forward to talking about how purpose shows up in the workplace.
Thanks, Leslie. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about you. Who is Adam, both personally and professionally?
Well, personally, I'm a husband and a dad and an avid pickleball player. And I love hiking. And professionally, I was an entrepreneur for almost 15 years in venture capital, venture tech world, so pretty high stress environment, and held a variety of roles in that world. And then now I'm an executive coach. So I support executives, I support founders on their own growth journeys in that high, intense, stressful environment that I once lived in. I help them become the best version of themselves and create a sustainable version of themselves through a pretty intense time.
Very cool. Well, that is one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on the show, because as both an entrepreneur and now an executive coach for entrepreneurs and leaders, I imagine you have an interesting perspective on purpose in the workplace. So looking forward to diving into it.
Excited to dive in. I love the topic. It's different too. Like for me, I was like on the way here, I was like, this is great. Like I haven't actually done a podcast on this, so I can't just say all my standard things. I've got to really explore here with you, and I'm excited about that.
Wonderful. Well, let's just dive into that, into purpose in the workplace. When you think about the topic of purpose and you think about going to work every day, what do you see? How does purpose show up in the workforce?
Yeah, well, I was thinking on the way here, reflecting, one, like purpose is such a big topic. Mm-hmm. In some ways, kind of defining it, I was like almost a little overwhelmed, and then I was also like, but there are things I know are true, of me, and like purpose for myself. I think, the thing that jumped out to me, and I know we're moving parts and pieces and, so like subject to change. Hopefully by the time the episode comes out, I'm like, no, that's still true of me. But I think of my own purpose as like creating safety for others to explore and to uncover their highest and best version of themselves. And then also being a person that helps them both find that clarity, but then also give them the confidence on what to do, like how to become that version of themselves. And so then when I think about how that shows up, so do you mean how it shows up at my work or how it shows up for others at work?
Let's do both, because I'm interested in both sides of your professional career as an entrepreneur and also as a coach.
Yeah. Well, I think like for others, one is that I don't know if there's much more soul-crushing thing that happens for people than when they feel wholly detached from their purpose at work, right? When they show up to work, and this was a part of my early career for myself, and they like feel a thing deep inside of them that is like they're capable of, and then their work is in misalignment with that. Mm-hmm. And how that just is like a weight on your shoulders that you then carry into the rest of your life, right? And then I've seen the inverse of that too for people who their like hearts are set on fire, where they feel like the work they do is very much in alignment with who they are and how they feel released. And then that also spreads into the rest of their life as well. And I think a lot of the work I do in coaching is with that. There's so many people, you and I were just talking about this before we started recording, like there's such an ambition, but it's not necessarily examined ambition. And so we just go, I just got to get to the next job, the next promotion, without really asking like what it is that brings you alive. And then at some point you kind of think you're following this kind of like blind ambition, and then you have an awakening moment where you go, is that really what I want? Or is that just what society was telling me what I wanted, or some story that my parents, story I tell myself that my parents put pressure on me? And so a lot of the work that I do as a coach is helping people really go a level deeper than that, to really ask themselves, what is it that you want? And then why? Mm-hmm. And sometimes in that exploration, you realize, like, that isn't what I want. I actually want something different than that.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the outcomes from season 1, is that sometimes we don't stop and ask the question, what is our purpose, or what lights us up, or what keeps us up at night? And so when we just get up and we go through the motions of life, we get stuck. But it's when we can stop and ask those questions that we start to get clarity and can look to bring that into the workplace as well.
Yeah.
So you're an executive coach. Can you describe a little bit about your clients?
Well, I coach a really wide range of people. I would say there's like 3 main buckets of people. I coach a lot of early stage founders who are really at the beginning of their journey, and that's more like a lot of like half tactical coaching, like what do you do at an early stage startup, and half like, this is so stressful and like, how do I manage this? And almost every founder starts a company for some deep-seated fear, insecurity, or motivator. And so there's a lot to work through, like there was for me, and there is for them as well. And then, so that's one. The other is just like a CEO of a mid-sized company who gets pressure and inputs from all sorts of people, their board, the executive team, the employee base. And what I do with them is just give them a space to be an output where they can think about a problem and explore it deeply and really uncover, like I don't need to do a lot of like tactical guidance. It's just giving them space to think and space to process and to gain some level of clarity and confidence on what to do. And then the third would be emerging executives. You're an executive at a company and you have been asked to step up, but the business is growing currently faster than you are. And like growth for the individual doesn't really happen without intentionality. And so I create that kind of space for that person to identify, like, where do you want to grow? What do those things look like? And then let's pick one of those topics and come up with a way to practice something new for yourself, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So in your client conversations, and it's centered around the business, right? I mean, that's the nature of the coaching. It sounds like sometimes it can get personal too.
I wouldn't say it's centered around the business.
Okay.
It's both. It's about the person. Mm-hmm. And work is a huge part of their life, but there are lots of other things that are a big part of their life too.
Okay.
So I would say sometimes it's practical about work, and sometimes it's about behaviors and patterns that you have yourself. Those are very personal things that limit you at work. And so it's whatever the person needs. I try to not worry about it being like one thing or the other, and I just try to like let it be about that other person and being a very present person in their life who just gets out of the way and is what they need in the moment.
Right. I was asking because I'm curious, does the topic of purpose come up in coaching sessions, or is it maybe an underlying part of the coaching process?
Yeah, I don't know if it comes up by name. I think it comes up a lot subtly, though, whether it's that search for that next promotion and really examining what it is you want versus what you feel you have to do, what you have this kind of obligation, or I call it like almost on autopilot. So really getting to the root of that, or it just for founders and entrepreneurs, it's uncovering the deeper, like there's this fear and insecurity that motivates and drives a lot of entrepreneurs and founders. And then there's also this deeply true motivator that is why they started the business.
Okay, I was wondering.
And it goes back and forth. Like it was for me. It was like that for me too. And helping them live into this side, the deeply true, this is why I started the business and this is the good I have to do in the world, versus deep insecurity that maybe fueled them and allows them to have a drive and an intensity and a motor that a lot of people don't have access to, but maybe doesn't serve them anymore as well.
Okay. So in that example with the founder, the motivation, the deep personal reason why I started this, it sounds like purpose, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like I started this for this purpose.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is. I think it's that. I think it's like there is that side of it for sure. That's a big part of it, is like, this is the change I want to see in the world, or this is something that's fulfilling to me. And then it's always on a scale counterbalanced with some, like for me in my own entrepreneurial journey, I was like, my company was all about unlocking potential of other people. We measured cultures, and then we coached executives to build more inspiring workplaces, right? It's like very much aligned to my core purpose of helping unlock potential of other people and helping them see themselves. And, there's all these threads of like what I find purpose and meaning in. So that's one side. The other side is like, I was deeply insecure about finances. I had this story I'd tell myself, like, I'm going to go homeless. This is so risky. Why am I doing this? Or like, I want to be rich. There was another part. And so these two things, and one is, I wouldn't even say one is good or bad. It's not like there's like a good side and a bad side. It's just there is a helpful side. And this one side of this fear of financial insecurity was incredibly motivating to me, especially early in my career. It allowed me to really work at a pace that was really, startups are so hard that it gave me the intensity I needed to force success in the world. This isn't like a regular job where you can just go and do the job as long as you're better than other people. It's like, no, I'm trying to invent a thing that doesn't exist in the world. That takes a lot of force.
Right.
And it gave me some level of force, but the problem is that it wasn't like sustainable force. It was like, my old business partner, Santiago, he called it dirty fuel. There's like clean fuel that's sustainable. There's this dirty fuel where it's like, it's effective, but it wore out its welcome for me. It created stress and an anxiety, and then that manifests itself in how you lead people. And so really, like, then the leadership journey for me is just, how do I lean in more to the other side, to that kind of genuine purpose that is like sustainable fuel for me.
Can that side be the force that this other side was? Can purpose be that force?
Yeah, I think it can. Yeah, I think it, and many times for most people, I actually think it is. Mm-hmm. It's both. I think it is, because it is a healthier version of force, and so it's like the other one comes with it a lot of velocity of effort, but it also has a lot of downsides too. Like, you actually slow down when you work out of your stress, and then you treat people in ways that aren't your very best. And then you have to unwind all that work. You end up not moving quickly just because you're moving in like anxiety or desperation or fear, that sort of thing.
Well, and I imagine when you're moving with that force, the people around you are absorbing some of that energy too, which might not be as positive as your purposeful force.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's this phrase I use a lot for leaders, is like to find your calm, steady presence. Like, the very best leaders have a calm, steady presence. They create safety for their employees, where their employees can come when their employees see something broken or wrong or inefficient, they can come to that leader and trust that leader values what they have to say, and they might even make changes based on it. And that is very different than when you're leading out of that other side. What you do is you create psychological unsafety. You have unpredictable reactions. You feel oddly defensive, even though these people are trying to actually protect your business. They don't own the business, you do. And yet when they come to you, you feel defensive and it feels personal. And what you do then is you create a team of demotivated people who lack commitment and who usually are just looking for other jobs. They're just checking in, checking out. And so that's why it's not valuable for the long term. If it's just you, that's one thing, right? It's your own demons you're working through and your own journey you're working through. But once you've got a team of people to lead, it isn't really sustainable, scalable, or even effective to continue to grow the company through that.
Yeah. So this podcast is about purpose. So you talk about finding your calm, steady self.
Yeah.
When you're looking for that, is that an opportunity to tap into purpose? Can purpose help bring you into that calm, steady state?
That's a good question. So, like, can purpose help you get to that calm, steady state, you're saying?
Or be in it. Yeah. Yeah, get to it if you're in a state of anxiety, but also be that calm, steady presence that you help your clients maintain in their workplace.
Yeah. That's interesting, because the way I think about it for myself is like this purpose that like I've defined for myself. If I enact it from a calm, steady, rooted, centered, holistic place, I'm doing it in alignment with myself. And you create this kind of natural flow and goodness, and you're doing it like genuinely. But when I don't, it can look the same to the other people, right? But then what I'm not doing is creating like sustainability in myself. For me, like when I give to other people and I do it from my own strength and from my own security and my own wholeness, it is rooted in this strong, steady place. But when I am in my own frantic kind of, or desperation or neediness or those type of things, and then I attempt to do it, one, I'm not as effective, but two, it's like I'm not actually in alignment with myself. So I think I don't know which kind of comes first or the other. I do think that for me, finding that kind of calm, steady self, it isn't like you just decided. It actually takes discipline in my life. It's my routines with my phone and my habits in my life that are outside my phone, how I start my morning, how quickly I check my email, for example, versus reading something timelessly true. Or it's a belief that like my physical body is more important than the work that I have to do that day. And so I'm going to dedicate time to that. Or going on walks for me is a big deal. Walks without listening to things, or just creating just some space in my mind to reconnect with myself. Those are all things that I feel like when I have that, then I can almost like see, and I am connected to be able to see the purpose. But without those things, I'm almost on autopilot. It's like the unexamined life where you're just sort of going through the motions versus adding intentionality to your life.
So let's take that as an example, because that's another thing that came out of season 1 is this concept of rituals. And it's how rituals help us get centered into our life's purpose. It's intentionality around going inward and checking in with ourselves so that we can be who we want to be outward.
Yeah.
Does that concept apply to business too, as it relates to the topic of purpose? Are there things in business that are also rituals where the business goes in to make sure it's in alignment with its intended purpose in life?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's like the business leaders themselves and like the disciplines they have in their life that have huge ripple effects like to the rest of the company. Like if the leaders are going through having an examined life and have healthy rituals and habits in their life that help them show up in a calm, steady way, that has like just such a natural impact on the rest of the company. And then I think just at the company level, I think it's once a year at least, but usually it's once a year. You have all the leaders get together and work through literally the purpose. Why do we exist? Who do we exist for? And how do we agree that we're going to be with each other?
Right.
And that last part, the core values, and not just like the word core values, but more like how are we agreeing that we behave with one another? And what are those kind of ground rules? And setting a firm foundation for that is so clarifying for everybody inside the organization. Like that is a ritual and an intentionality that then obviously then once you have those, you have to enact them. You have to actually hold people accountable when they're not living in alignment with what the business has decided as the rules to play by, that sort of thing.
So in your perspective, who owns purpose in the workplace? Is that this executive team that comes together once a year? Who owns the purpose of the company?
I would say what's so interesting, normally, had you asked me 2 weeks ago or a month ago, I would have told you that it's the founders and the executive team. I'd say the founders vetted by the executive team would be like the kind of fundamental way that I would say that in general. That someone has to put a flag in the ground and somebody started the thing and to say, this is why we exist, right? This is the big thing we're doing in the world beyond just like the ticky-tack that we show up and do every day. And it is important to remind people both what that is and then also how their individual job connects to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a project right now where we have done, it's an employee-owned company, and instead of normally how I would do this is like at an executive leadership retreat, take 2 days off site, and that's one of the components of how you spend your time. It's like really either honing, or either creating, or redefining the purpose. But in this instance, it was like, nope, we want every single voice of the entire company to be a part of crafting this purpose. And it's been a really interesting project because it's like, how do you take in as many voices as possible, create an accurate reflection of that big why the company exists, but do it in a way that's additive versus diluting.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, and that was the challenge. I'm like really proud of what we created, because I think it's like, it also forces these really honest conversations, because every single word has people on both sides, of like, is it this or is it this? And like, and just the thoughtful dialogue. And so it certainly not an easy task, but I also think it's really cool. Like, I'm really proud of it too, that it's like we created something that I think that the employees all had a say in.
Right.
That we're saying, like, this is why we exist. This is the big why of what we're doing in the world, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's why for me this season 2, is so fascinating, because when we think about purpose, we often think about it as individual, but this is about collective purpose. And what I just heard you say is it starts by bringing the right people together and letting them each have a voice, and then working through that when they are split on each side of the words. How do we come together and see it in the same way?
Yeah. And there's this concept of disagreeing and committing, and that gets thrown around a lot in business. And this is like a perfect example of how that lives out. It's that there's disagreeing is like what I mean by that is when you're in the divergence phase, you have a responsibility to represent your perspective and how you see the business from your angle.
Okay.
With full confidence, conviction, clarity. You debate it to the fullest. You have a duty to do that, especially if you're an executive. And then at some point, though, there has to be hard decisions that are made that may or may not be your perspective.
Right.
And so then when that happens, then that's really where that commit phase, it's like a recognition. This is not ultimately my job, decision to make. I represented my idea to the fullest, and now I'm going to get behind the kind of collective idea. It's not an easy task, but I will say it's easier when you know you represented yourself fully during the divergence phase versus kind of this convergence phase that happens later. The other thing I was going to say is for employees and how you create this at the full company level is once you have this defined purpose, the higher order of the business, like the why that the business exists, then I think what the best organizations do is have each employee think about, how do I support this? Like, what is this in my life? Like, what is the unique thing I do to bring this to life, no matter what your job is? And it takes a little bit of like work to do that, but it's cool if you run that exercise and then you have people share back what it is. It's like a great way for them to take ownership themselves. And the dream scenario is that person can connect the dots to their own purpose in their own life, their own role inside the business and how it impacts the company purpose.
Right.
And then those things are in alignment.
Right.
It's not how everybody's, everybody has different jobs, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but I think it's a good goal to shoot for.
Yeah. How often do you feel like that alignment between employees' purpose to employees' job to company purpose?
Not very often.
Okay. That's what I'm seeing too.
Yeah.
It's not very often, and I'm curious why that is.
Some of it is like some job. I mean, this is too big of a problem to solve. I'm not quite sure. Like, some of it is that the workforce is isolated down jobs, like kind of like part of the manufacturing era, where it's like assembly line. We do that at tech companies. We do that all over the place. We take diverse, unique skill sets, and then we shrink them down into these isolated jobs. And it's harder to find purpose in those jobs. It's not impossible, but it is harder. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is that deep down, people also just need to make money to survive in the world.
Right.
And so we're talking about a higher order task, which is not available. Like it's not, it's on the, hierarchy of needs. It's kind of higher up on the pyramid. And so it's not something that everyone is able to get to. Like some people just end up having a job to have a job. Mm-hmm. And I think that's and now the flip side of that is you can find purpose in that concept alone.
Yeah.
Like you can find purpose to go, my purpose is to provide for my family, to live a good life outside of work. Like work isn't my purpose. And I think that's a perfectly like noble and great way to spend your life. Like you don't have to find this kind of merger of exactly what I do is, I think where tension comes is when it's in misalignment. So where you're actually like showing up and it actually it's pulling away from who your kind of core sense of self. Like you're like, oh, I really want to do this other thing, but I have to show up and do this.
Right.
You'd be in a very blessed position if you lived your whole life and never had a moment like that, where you didn't just have a job that you were just doing for other reasons outside of the job.
Mm-hmm. So in that example, because one of the things that you started with was this, there's nothing more soul crushing than when you're in this situation and your job is kind of pulling you, it's in disalignment with your purpose. What is the responsibility of the business for that situation? Is there a responsibility for the business for employees like that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, in an ideal world, you'd be open about it and have conversations. I think, though, there's all sorts of scenarios where the person just like the role or the company, like maybe the company's values are just not aligned, period. And so rather than it being the company's responsibility to fix it, it's the company's responsibility to enact the values. So it's clarifying for the employee that is not a great fit for them. Mm-hmm. Even in the scenario for myself, I was talking about, like there were multiple layers that caused that feeling for me. I didn't have enough work to do. So that was a lot of it. Like I didn't really have a way to fill my day. And so I was just sitting there, but I was tied to the office.
Right.
And so I just sat there and it was really boring. So that was part of it. I had a little bit of ethical conflict with the role and how I felt about the business itself and was I in alignment with why the business existed. And that created tension for me. And I think that was part of it. And that's not really something the business could solve, or they're not going to solve it for me at the very least. Like I was way early in my career. And so I'm not sure that was a solvable thing for them. Mm-hmm. I think there's a variety of things that cause it.
Well, and what I hear is ultimately the responsibilities on the individual. If the company's playing its role of living its values and being open and honest and transparent about what those are.
Right.
Which that's a big order in and of itself.
It is, yeah. That is the duty of the company.
Right.
Yes.
But if they are doing that, then and there's this kind of disalignment, then ultimately it's up to the employee to take responsibility for their purpose.
Yeah, I think it's I'm sure it's some version of a combination. Nothing's black and white. It's like some version of a combination of that. But I do think we put a lot of pressure on companies which is, I think some of that is warranted, and some of it is, I think employees really do have an obligation to kind of represent for themselves what they want, mm-hmm. and also to recognize you have your own choice. You get to choose. You are kind of choosing to work at that company, and you have full agency and autonomy to decide where you want to work, mm-hmm. and to find that for yourself if it's something that you prioritize.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So are there advantages in the workplace when purpose is present? And if so, what are the advantages?
Well, I think just at the highest level, that when a company has a clearly defined why or a purpose, it's always better. Because what it does is that it gives clarity to the employee. It can make the employees understand what this is all about. It's easy for executives to take that for granted because they're so close to it. It's easy for people in customer success to take it for granted because oftentimes they get to tangibly see the impact. But 80% of the employees are quite disconnected from the big why of the business. And when you have clarity of that big why, it might change the type of things you bring up to your manager. Like where you're going, oh, wait, what if we did this? What if we did this? And it creates kind of feedback that is directed the correct way, like, right? It's towards something. Feedback can be really broad, ideas and strategy, all those things. And what we want is to create some level of a North Star that points people toward where we're going. And then beyond that, then, if the purpose is the tip of the spear, as you start to roll out strategy for the year, initiatives that you're working on, it all points the same direction. There's a consistency to it. And without that, you just create these chaotic environments where people are sort of drifting, you know, and they don't really understand where the business is going and what it's like, what are we all doing here?
Yeah. So I hear you saying with purpose, we're all pointing in the same direction. We have an understanding of what we're working towards and why we're working towards it. Yeah. And what's the benefit of that?
Movement. It's hard to think about what's not the benefit of everybody moving in the same, like not moving in the same direction is the chaotic. I mean, it's sadly like the work environment for a lot of people where we're all moving in different directions and we're not moving in alignment together. But when a group of people have a shared sense of alignment, that's where great growth happens. That's where when you look back on your career and those amazing moments, it was a team of people who had clarity of where they were going, who had a stretching goal, and it wasn't like it was the easiest job. It was that you did something hard together, but you were all pointed in a direction. When I look back on my career, that was the most fun I ever had. Very first startup, like, you know, our goal our first year was to get 32 customers, or 5 of us. We're all like a team. Like, how are we going to do this? We had one customer, and we got 100 customers in our first year.
Wow.
And like that year was so fun. It was the hardest I've ever worked in my entire life. And I know I could probably never even replicate that again. But I also look back on it like we were so motivated. Like I remember that 100th customer, we all like gathered around and wrote it on this whiteboard. It's just like, wow, look at what we just did. We were just a team of people who didn't have a job basically before we started our own job and not super great careers up to that point. And we like created something in the world that was like really like ours. And the other thing that was happening, I think that we maybe didn't even notice, was that we were unlocking like all of our careers too, you know, and like that's just a really, it's a really cool thing. And I think it only happened because we were all.
Okay, I was going to ask, could you have gotten 100 customers without it?
No way. No,
okay.
It's too hard.
So it is about outcomes, because at one point I was wondering, does it just make us feel good? Is that the outcome? That even though it's hard, we feel good about the work that we're doing, but it's also, we feel good, but we can also do things that we couldn't without it.
It creates focus. I think that's the thing that for like in that scenario, it just created a lot of focus for us.
And focus creates results.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. You combine focus with a belief that it matters. I think that's part of what purpose does. Like, oh, this matters. And those two things together really are like, you know, a pretty powerful combination.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Because of that, would you consider purpose a competitive differentiation strategy for a business?
Like I think a company having a purpose is essential. I think it's like a non-negotiable to me, I guess, like because of the thing I shared earlier, with the kind of hierarchy of strategy. Like the only way to build a great company is to have a great strategy. The only way to have a great strategy is to have a purpose that tells you that points the tip of the kind of the North Star.
So let's put 2 companies up against each other. Both have a purpose.
Okay.
Are they at a similar advantage?
Well, it depends. I think there's 3 things. One is, it's not just do you have a purpose, it's do you have an activated purpose.
Okay.
So
how do you live it out?
Yep. Do the employees feel like it's authentic? Do they connect their own role to it? Do they understand the bigger impact in the world? Does it feel believable and real, or does it feel like a poster on the wall? Like that's one. The second is, the values and how you live it out. So do you live it out? Like, do you all kind of execute in alignment with one another? And do you have rules of engagement of how you kind of move throughout the organization? And then the third is execution. And I cannot stress enough how critical that part is. You can't have it without the other two. Like, you do have to have agreement on where you're going and how you're going to behave on your way to get there. But then also creating a clear strategy that people are all aligned to and have clarity of what the work is. I've been in the work development, leadership, culture space for 15 years. I am stunned by how many employees don't know what work they're supposed to be doing.
Really?
And they feel like they don't know how they're doing. They don't know what to do. They don't know if they're doing a good job. They don't know exactly where the boundaries of their role is versus their colleague's role. And so that chaotic environment leads to poor execution. And ultimately, between those two companies, the one that succeeds is the one that executes, that builds a strategy, that communicates and is nimble enough to kind of adjust the strategy and actually does the thing that they say they're going to do.
Right, yeah. So why is that most employees don't have that clarity? Where's the breakdown in a business?
Oh gosh, I could do full episode on it.
Okay.
I'll try to give you the quick. Let's see here. My goodness, this is such a big issue.
Well, let me ask it this way, the short one. Is it a lack of purpose?
I don't think it's a lack of purpose.
Okay.
I think it's a lack of good quality management.
Okay.
If you think about what poor management is, it's like back in the, say office culture, it's like people looking around, just making sure people look busy. But they're not really thinking about what work they're actually doing. And I think that the reason it happens is that leaders are so stressed out that they don't create clarity and give feedback to their employees. It's hard work to really sit and think, success for this person would be this, this, and this. And actually communicating that and then assessing on that. Not many, it's almost shocking how few companies actually do that at kind of the management level. This is what the role is. This is the expectations. This is what success looks like. And then I'm going to give you regular feedback along the way. It seems so simple, but I mean, that's part of why I guess I've been able to have a career is that it is not lived out with consistency at all.
Well, and then you think about that, just even that conversation, which is very much about executing the job and the role. If that's not happening, then of course we're not talking about the individual's purpose and how it can be in alignment with their job.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot. We've talked about who owns purpose, advantages of having purpose, how it shows up, the challenges. Is there anything else left unsaid in this topic of purpose in the workplace?
The one thing I was thinking about is that I think sometimes we make purpose a pretty grandiose topic. And just to say that purpose can look really different. You can have purpose and it not be the actual job that you do. You can find purpose in creative ways. I want to bring my kids to Disney World. I want to have balance in my life, and that is my main purpose. And so my job is just a means for that, And so instead of, I think so often we put all this pressure that the tactical work that you do has to be your purpose. I actually don't know that I think that's the case. I think you can find purpose a lot of ways. And so maybe just to the listener, take a little pressure off yourself or think a layer beyond the actual work and think about your life in total and then think about how that role could feed your purpose.
Love that. Yes. Any other advice or thoughts?
I think we did it.
Woohoo! I do too. I appreciate you coming on Purpose Project and sharing your experience and having this conversation.
That was great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. In Adam's introduction, he introduces this concept of examined ambition. And he shared how so many times people are just ambitious, but they're going from one thing to the next, from one promotion to the next promotion. And oftentimes, that ambition isn't examined. This concept of examined ambition doesn't just apply to individuals. This concept of examined ambition also relates to businesses. Without examining the ambition of the business, we run the risk of just being on autopilot, of chasing growth for growth's sake and losing sight of what truly matters. But when we take the time to examine the ambition of the business, to ask why the business strives for the things it wants, we can move with greater intention. We can move with alignment and focus. It's through this examined ambition where purpose becomes a powerful force for business. It's not just for personal clarity, but it is also a force for building businesses that make a meaningful impact. So I'll leave you with this question. When was the last time you examined your ambition? Adam, thank you for being on the show, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Purpose Project is brought to you for education and for entertainment purposes. This podcast is not intended to replace the advice that you would receive from a licensed therapist or doctor or any other qualified professional.